What are there, like 6 billion people on this planet, or 7 billion? Whatever, it doesn't matter, because for all our colors and credos, human beings basically fall into two categories. There are Ocarina of Time people, and there are Link to the Past people. Now, full disclosure, I've always been an Ocarina of Time guy, but it's impossible to ignore that for all its revolutionary, genre-defining mechanics, timeless design, and immaculate pacing, Ocarina of Time is basically a 3D version of A Link to the Past. And you know, in that light, this widespread debate over which is the definitive Legend of Zelda largely misses the point. Obviously, they're both excellent, they're both among the best games ever made, doesn't matter. But even for an Ocarina guy, it's important to note that for all the metaphorical bushes that Ocarina of Time sliced down, it did so with a blade that was forged in A Link to the Past. And as good as this game is, its timing was even better. When Nintendo released the second Legend of Zelda for the NES in 1988, they sort of shot themselves in the foot. You see, that game changed up the mechanics of the original a bit more than some fans were willing to tolerate, myself included. And as Ray mentioned in his review of Zelda 2, it just didn't feel like a Zelda game, at least not entirely. So when the time came for a third Zelda, Nintendo not only returned to the template of the groundbreaking original, but they actually refined it. In fact, one could legitimately argue that they perfected it. A Link to the Past not only pushed Zelda back to the company's forefront, but it solidified the franchise as one that would become one of the industry's preeminent. Now, there are plenty of things that make A Link to the Past such a classic, but what's really noteworthy is that it took the open-world feel of the original Zelda into something a bit more linear. Now, it's not a Mario game or anything, you're not going from level 1-1 to level 1-2, but this epic adventure does have a somewhat guided feel. You're free to explore Hyrule as you please, and you'll really want to since it's such a living, breathing world, but there's also a clear structure. There's a glowing X on your map, there's always somewhere you're supposed to go, even if you go elsewhere. But you know, that has kind of become standard for the series, and something that actually makes A Link to the Past stand out among other Zelda games in the series is the sheer amount of temples it has you explore. Unlike more contemporary installments, A Link to the Past throws you into a dungeon almost immediately. There are easily more dungeons to explore in this Zelda than any other in the series, and in that regard, A Link to the Past is kind of like the ultimate dungeon-crawling Zelda experience. But to me, more than anything, what's striking about A Link to the Past is how incredibly fresh the game still feels to this day. This game hasn't aged a bit. It still controls sharply and intuitively, the music is just awe-inspiring, the graphics are gorgeous, it's still an incredibly immersive world. I mean, you can get lost in the masterful design of any Zelda game, but with one exception, I'd argue that none are as thoroughly satisfying and engaging as The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. A timeless blueprint for greatness that Nintendo still hasn't changed.